And we're back, everyone. People in the chat,
Hello.
make some noise for the lovely Dusty. Dusty, welcome in. It's
Hello.
so good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so great that you had time to do this. I've been so excited.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, you caught us at a good time because we're about to leave for a bunch of shows. So
yeah,
I'll be like into the void, so to speak, for like 3 months basically. So it's nice for me too, because this is like the calm before the storm,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. And like from what I've seen you post on the internet, you're gonna be touring a lot. Like if you want to get round to that, we can definitely get round to that a little bit later. But
Sure.
yeah, let's just start from one end to the other then. Tell me about you guys because I know who you are, but maybe not everyone in chat do.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dusty Gannon. I'm probably more colloquially known as your goth dad on TikTok and Instagram, which is like this character thing that I do. But I play guitar and sing for the band Vision Video. We're based out of here in Athens, Georgia. We are sort of a post-punk, little gothy, little bit of new wave, a little bit of everything kind of band. It's one of those bands where I use these terms for sort of brevity's sake to describe it, but it's a little bit of everything. And but we mostly take after a lot of bands from like the early '80s and the kind of in that gray area of whether it was like truly goth or post-punk or whatever you want to call it. But bands like The Cure, early Cure, The Sound, The Smiths, Joy Division, and my favorite band, the Chameleons. So there's a lot of influence of that, but there's also a lot of sort of modern flair to it, and a lot of sort of modern things that wouldn't have been done back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of our music is kind of about a lot of my experiences as like either a firefighter or when I was in the military for a long time, and just sort of my it's basically my project that is the way that I process the world in an artistic sense, and how I try to help myself like understand the world because I feel like I don't understand it very well sometimes. So yeah, that's I think that's pretty much Vision Video in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually also ties in with like one of the questions that I had lined up for you, which was what are your main influences when it comes to bands? But you obviously mentioned a bunch of them here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think like Emily brings a lot of different influence because like she is about 10 years younger than I am,
yeah.
so she was really into sort of like the emo music wave like back in the early 2000s, whereas like that obviously wasn't my thing. And that there's elements of that come into play in that realm. But we don't. I think what's great about what we do is we don't ever let anything like overwhelm the sentiment, like, because I think it's really easy for artists to go like, oh, I really like this kind of music, I want to make this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and then it ends up just sounding like a replication of that exact sound. Whereas I think it's more beneficial to allow like art to kind of be whatever it wants to be,
Yeah.
and that kind of that requires for you to get out of the way of your own art. So I think there's a lot of different influence. Like I also take a lot of influence from like sort of art punk from here in Athens, Georgia, like REM, B-52s,
Yeah.
Pylon, a lot of that really weird music that came from the late 70s and early 80s in this like very cool but very weird town that we live in. Um, I've always been fascinated with that stuff, and I think a bit of that leaks through as well.
Yeah.
If you're listening closely, maybe.
Yeah, and especially if you have like an ear for what your influences are of various kinds, because there are some obvious influences and maybe also some less obvious ones.
Right, right, exactly.
Um, so yeah, like someone asked me like, how did you and your band partner meet? Like, did you meet each other through the music scene? Did you? How did that
Yeah.
happen? Like, how did you come to be as a band?
So the original drummer who left recently to kind of focus on family life because
Mm-hmm.
we tour a lot. He and I started out. I was bartending at this music venue here in Athens called the Georgia Theater, which is a really great. It's like 1,000 capacity, beautiful theater with amazing sound. It's just sort of like the beating heart of Athens, like between that and the 40 Watt Club. And he was a bar back, and I was a bartender, and
Mm-hmm.
we would more often than not just like to end up talking about music when it was kind of slower. And I had just gotten back from the military, so I was kind of writing songs on my own time and just I didn't really have any major intention or design with it. I just was like writing songs that were kind of like I said, so helping me process my experiences in the military and we kind of just got together through that because he's in a band called She He He, which is like a punk band,
Mm-hmm.
and him and his wife and their friend Noel are in that band, and they have like a practice space at their house. And he said, hey, you should come over sometime, and I'll put some drums behind these guitars. And then Dan, who is our original bass player, who has also since left, he basically um, was just like a staple of the Athens music scene here. He's been playing in bands for forever, and he kind of heard some of the stuff we were doing online, and then like as we were kind of posting little snips of each song,
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up joining for bass. And then Emily and I met. Funny enough, we met at a tarot card reading class, which was terrible. It was so bad. It was I feel like there's a lot of interpretation of the self in that
Mm-hmm.
in tarot, and like there's a lot of sort of openness in that, and I acknowledge that, but these people like clearly had no idea what they were talking about.
Oh
And it
dear.
was a free class, and like I remember Emily and I were just kind of laughing about it to each other, not like openly, just kind of quietly. I kept like she was sitting next to me, and I was like, I don't think these people know what they're talking about. But yeah, it was kind of fun, and she was really good friends with a girl that I dated at that time. And at that point we were just getting to our first show, which was actually just a three piece. It was just Jason, Dan, and I.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to the first show as a attendee of the show, and she really liked it. And I had known from her friend, like basically that I was saying, hey, we need to find a keyboardist. We need somebody to play synth. And the girl that I was dating at the time was like, Emily, my friend that you just met, she's like classically trained in piano. So I was like, oh, well, perfect. So we asked her to come, and the rest is kind of history. I mean, she just immediately assimilated in, and is without a doubt the best musician in the band. That's for sure.
I mean, those tarot readers would probably tell you that it was meant to be, that it was supposed to happen.
Oh, exactly. Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, I am open myself to that kind of thing, but obviously it has to be with people who know what they're doing.
Right, right, exactly, right.
But like, what a fun little story.
Yeah.
That's cute. That's really cute. Um, so like, how long have you been in the subculture, like the goth subculture? Do you call yourself a goth even?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent of identification for brevity's sake, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Like, I think people put way too much significance in being like, I am a goth, and
Yeah.
like, I mean, but sure, yeah, I mean, I definitely I DJ a goth night. I play in a band that is maybe arguably goth, and then I enjoy the music, which I think is the singular important factor. Is like, are you a fan of goth bands?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't really put too much like significance behind it, other than just sort of like telling people like, hey, we are a gothy band or whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. But so I got into it when I was pretty young, actually. I was probably about 12 or 13 when I really found it properly. My sister was sort of into it for a time, not super long time, but
Mm-hmm.
my sister's 6 years older than I. So I had that thing where I was like always kind of looking up to her, and she was always cool, and I was just like a dork. And like you know, I needed to like have her as the example of all the cool things.
Yeah.
So that probably had a pretty significant impact on it. But so when I never really understood that it was like music based though. I just saw like her and her friends like looking like cool vampires
Yeah.
basically. And then as she moved out of the house and I got a little bit older, and I started getting into music.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a very rural, like very tiny town, like very, very small. And there were not a lot of like alternative people at all. And certainly not like goth people, I guess.
Yeah.
But there was a little bit of a like tiny little punk group, but there were like basically, save for me and like a couple other friends, there were no like goth kids in that high school. But I was probably about 12 or 13 when I started getting into it via the way of like I remember watching the movie Night of the Demons, which has this like dance sequence to Bauhaus's Stigmata Martyr. And that was like a big moment for me where I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't know what this is, but whatever the hell this is, it's for me. And and I think like a lot of it was kind of that in that way, like concurrent and parallel to like my interest in horror films, which I mean, obviously not everybody is into horror that's in the
Yeah.
goth scene, but like I think a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And a lot of those movies from the 80s that were like low budget, sort of like real fun, cheesy 80s horror movies had those songs in those movies. So that really significantly brought me in, but also just like listening to bands like Joy Division, that are under that, like, I call it the goth umbrella.
Yeah.
It's like, it's this huge sort of encapsulation of so many different genres of music and so many different kinds of music, but they all kind of work in the same world.
Yeah.
So that, Joy Division was like a big moment where I'll never forget like listening to like the song Disorder and just being like, man, that's it. Like that's the way I feel about the world. And like that's, an important moment when you're a teenager, when you like latch onto something. But as I got older, I moved out of I'd like dropped out of high school when I was 17 because I wasn't learning anything. And I got a job in the city of Athens, and my friends lived in Atlanta, which is like the big city
Mm-hmm.
here. It's about an hour and a half away, and they would take me from Athens because there really wasn't even a goth scene in Athens back then. There were a couple people that would probably identify in that realm, but
Yeah.
there was no like community. So my friends would come get me like once a month, and we would go to Atlanta, and there was this venue that still exists. It's just in a different location, but it was called the Masquerade, and they had this night called like Old Wave, which I always thought was a little like, it's like, damn, way to tell people they're old. But it was like the early 2000s, and most of what they played was like 80s music, but it was a lot of like pointedly goth music. Like you
Mm.
would always hear Bauhaus, you would always hear like
Sisters
Sisters
of
of
Mercy.
Mercy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was always like, the major stuff. It was not as intensely like there were a few other goth nights that were more like, because back in the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
if you were participating in the culture back then, at least in the States, there was a heavy emphasis on like industrial and electronic body music and like just really synthy, like dancey, like V&V Nation,
Yeah.
Pop Tigma Berserk, and like stuff like that. Like it was very, very prevalent, and that wasn't really my kind of thing. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like super into it. So anyway, we would go to this one night and kind of disregard the others. And I did that for quite a while, through me like getting into college and even in the military. When I was in the military, I was stationed in Germany, which was wonderful because I'm from Germany originally. And
Oh, right.
um and it was a cool time because like I remember like I was a leader in the army, and I had like 30 people under my responsibility, and I didn't really want them to like necessarily know. I didn't ultimately care if they knew that I was like into goth stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want them to like know that I was like really like dressing up or like wearing makeup or anything,
Yeah.
because you just don't want to like, there's a fear of losing legitimacy, and I took my job very seriously and I was good at my job. So I would get on a train from Amberg, where I lived, and I would go to Nuremberg, and they had this like, actually, I think it was like Erlangen, that this suburb of Nuremberg,
Hmm.
where they had this goth night, and I would go there, and it was, I loved it, but it was also kind of like lonely because I didn't have anybody there like to enjoy it with, and I
Yeah,
was just sort of like, oh, I'm an American, and like, yeah, I speak a good bit of German, but I was like, I just don't feel, it just felt weird.
yeah,
So there were years where I was like very sort of disenfranchised with the goth scene, where I felt like very much so a participant, but also like an outsider as well, which is super weird.
yeah.
And I didn't love that. But as soon as I got back I moved back to Georgia when I left the active duty military in 2016. And that's like when I started bartending again. And my friend actually from high school and we started the goth night here in Athens. And we've been doing it ever since 2016. And it's grown like quite a bit, which is super cool. Like we just had our goth night on Saturday,
Hmm.
this last weekend, and we had 150 people, which is not bad for a town that is the size of Athens. It's a very small city,
Yeah.
so that was cool. So yeah, that's kind of the run. I feel like I'm just like ranting now, but
No, no, it's
like
okay. It's fine. It's fine. I'm intrigued, and I can also kind of relate to some of what you're saying, like especially the whole thing of um like because I'm Danish, we don't really have that big of a goth scene here. So if I
yeah,
really want to go party, I have to go visit my friends in Germany and go party with them. And as
yeah,
someone who can understand German way better than I speak it, I'm sometimes like, um, when people come up and talk to me, like,
yeah,
so I can kind of relate to what you're saying, and also like the whole thing of like being a part of something and feeling like an outsider. That's also definitely how I myself have felt sometimes in the Danish goth scene.
yeah,
Probably because like there's not that many, like a lot of the people who are there are like a good deal older than me, and they are very very much leaning into like there is only 80s goth music, never mind 80s
yeah,
revival. They don't listen to that, they only listen to the old stuff, which means
yeah.
that they're listening to the same 50 songs or whatever.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time now, especially
Yeah.
because um my friend Chandler, who goes by Scarecrow Joe on like TikTok and Instagram, they just made a video. So they do like retrospective historical analysis of music subcultures,
Hmm.
especially particular to the goth one. And they and I are both we are very much so like music nerds. Like I have a bookshelf over here that's just like nothing but books about music, and most of them are either post-punk, new wave, or goth, or somewhere in that realm. But Chandler knows like way more than anybody probably that I've ever met about any of this stuff because they just read all the time.
Hmm.
And they brought up a really interesting point. I'm actually going to make a video about this in response to their video, which is they're talking about kind of the origins of like what we know as goth today, and what it really, there are so many different places that it came from, but obviously the most like direct one is punk rock.
Hmm.
And they talk about like what happened to punk rock and why that sort of fell apart, and they absolutely nailed it. And it's that it became formulaic, it became appropriated by business. It was like, here's how we can prepackage these like bands that they sound all exactly the same. They are on a sort of like formula that is preconditioned to sell records under the guise of like punk rock. And I think in a way we are seeing that to a degree nowadays, because people have like they have such an ideology of what it's supposed to be,
Hmm.
and there is not a heavy tolerance because we want to protect like the preciousness of this like very bizarre weird thing that we all participate in.
Yeah.
But it's actually counterintuitive, because if you don't allow some level of sort of new influence or ingenuity or whatever you want to call it, then the whole thing will fall apart. It will
Yeah.
collapse and it will die, because people will get tired of the same thing over and over again, and it will become just sort of like so boring, basically. So anyway, I think it's it's an interesting genre, and I think that we are finally starting to see like bands that are doing things that are not just like strictly in this sort of like this is how it's exactly supposed to sound kind of way.
Yeah.
um and that will always like ruffle feathers, that will always make people a little upset.
Oh yes,
But it's
for sure.
but it's really hard when you're definitely talking to like people from beyond, I'd say, even the early 2000s, like the 90s and 80s into the 2000s.
Yeah.
Those are the people that have the most like staunch definitions of what it's supposed to be, and they are the ones getting very upset when it's any different. And that's hard for me because I can't relate. Like I
Yeah.
want to see, I mean, I also, to play devil's advocate though, like it does have to exist within a certain sensibility. Like you wouldn't call a jazz band a metal band, right?
Hmm.
Like there has to be some identity to it and some left and right limit, so
Yeah.
to speak. But there's so much room to play in between that left and right limit, and
Ye-
it should not be somewhere that's right in the middle. It should be all over the place.
yeah,
So,
exactly. And like, um, as someone in the chat is saying right now, let me just find the comment
sure.
real quick. Yeah, someone's saying that gatekeeping is such a downer, which is true.
Yeah.
And there's also someone else saying, I think that the people who are gatekeeping just want to preserve history and preserve the boundaries of a subculture, which might be correct. But there is a fine art to gatekeeping it, because you don't need to shut the gates so tightly that no one can
Right.
come in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there's like a level of nuanced conversation that we have effectively lost the ability to have
Hmm.
nowadays because of social media, because like the whole thing, all of these social media uh, platforms are based on algorithms that promote like controversy
Yeah.
and like, people having really pointed opinions and getting like angry with each other. And that's when those algorithms go, oh, we need to show all this content to people. And that's really stupid because it doesn't open the door for like a conversation of like, and not to be like self-centered or conceited or anything. I never meant to do this like by design, but
Hmm.
I think that like our band, it's so funny to me when I read anything about Vision Video online because it is so polarized. Like
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, it's totally goth. Like you can hear The Cure and you can hear this. And then there's people like, this is a pop band and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, does it matter? Like, does it really matter? Not really. And people get really, really hateful and awful about it, uh, which is funny to me because none of those people ever say that shit to my face.
Yeah.
But regardless, I just think that if you're going to try to keep a scene growing and you're trying to keep events alive and you're trying to keep like if you want things to progress and you want things to stick around, you have to make like little allowances.
Yeah.
uh and but I think that's also part of the like local scene's responsibility. Like, you know, when somebody comes up to us um at a goth night and is like, hey, can you play Metallica? I'm gonna say no
Hmm.
because I'm like, well, it doesn't really work. And the argument is always, well, you're playing B-52s and you're playing, whatever else, and that's not goth. And I'm like, yes, but it works
Yeah.
like in the realm, and it's again nuance. Like these are things that I don't have the answers for. I can't. I can probably open a book from this book called Party Out of Bounds about the 80s like art punk scene here in
Hmm.
Athens and like maybe find some excerpts of like why some of this stuff works well in the goth night scene.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't land with those people. So anyway, it's like you there again, all this stuff, all of these things boil down to this idea of like being reasonable, being welcoming, yes, having, like I said, a left and right limit, like
Hmm.
having some sensibility. And for me, like it boils down to like components, like, right. So whenever somebody's like, is this a goth band? I kind of bring it down to a few factors, like, okay, technicalities.
Hmm.
So like, is there reverb and chorus all over the guitars? Is the bass line, like really angular, simple but driving and chorusy as hell? Is there a lot of like toms hitting, in the
Yeah.
rhythm section? Is there sort of like, you know, the vocals again? There's so many widely different vocals. You've got, some stuff from like, uh, Christian Death and Roz Williams all the way to like, um, I don't know, trying to think of something that's like totally different, like, uh, I'm drawing blanks, but like I don't know, maybe Patricia Morrison from
Yeah.
Sisters of Mercy, who's like really really beautiful and has that pitch and control. Um, there's so many different things you can do with it, but again, left and right limits. But there's all that technical stuff, and then
Hmm.
there's like sort of the content of the music, like does it hit that thing for me? Like does it hit that like sort of macabre or nostalgic wistful longing and like maybe sadness, doesn't have to be overtly depressing, but just like exploring darker things.
Yeah.
And then honestly, like, and a lot of people might get upset with me about this, but like what does the band appear like, I mean, are they obviously, do they fit into that? Not that you have to dress a certain way, but I think it helps like bring in an aspect, because
Yeah.
all this stuff is, it's all art and it's all comprehensive, right? Like, so it's all, it's like the sum of parts and not any one part.
Hmm.
I don't know if any of this makes sense.
Yeah, to me it makes sense. To me it makes a lot of sense because my brain is kind of curly in the same direction, I think.
Right. Because so this is, for me as a music history nerd, this is what it really comes down to. There was never any such thing as goth in the early 80s
Yeah.
at all. Like nobody for the prime years of goth, like from 79 to like 84, I think,
Hmm.
nobody was calling it goth.
Yeah, I
And it
mean,
really didn't come into vogue until the late 80s, and by then a lot of it had kind of died. Not to make a pun, but like it was very like this, the scene had stagnated. The same thing that happened with punk rock happened with goth. It became appropriated by record companies, and a lot of these bands started just churning out music that was like all super formulaic. And a lot of it's really good, to be
yeah.
honest, but it was just so like, oh, we've heard this before. And the artistry and the like concern for keep saying this word, but nuance and like flavor just disappeared. Um, and 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 so when you think about that, and the fact that nobody was like, "Hey, we're goths. This
Yeah.
is goth music."
Yeah, I
That
mean,
means that the door was always open. It was always open.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
there's never
And
been a council of goths who are like, "This is what it is," and.
yeah, and like, I mean, some of the very, very big bands, like way back when, Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, Sisters of Mercy, none of them ever called themselves goth.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like,
think it's funny to me because I think that like if you read Lowell Tolhurst's book, who was the original drummer for The Cure, uh, him and a couple other people like adjacent to The Cure, but Lowell wrote that, and I think that book Cured, which is their like biography book, there's definitely mention of them being like, yeah, we didn't really understand that at first, but we like embraced it.
mhm,
But I mean, there's like no doubt in my mind that the Cure like acknowledges now
yeah,
that like at least some of them, I don't, maybe Robert Smith doesn't, but Lowell Tolhurst and I think like Simon Gallup, they were like, yeah, this is a goth band at certain points. Like Lowell Tolhurst said that 17 seconds, um, pornography, and what's the other one? Oh shit. There's like three records that he's like, those are the goth records.
yeah.
It's not Disintegration too, which is always interesting to me.
Yeah, because
But
just by the name, that would have been the obvious one. Um,
right, right, exactly. But so anyway, like yeah, I think there was actually a resistance, and that's where that like kind of cool quotient to be like, oh, like we're not goth kind of
Yeah.
comes from. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently that like was hilarious, and I will kind of bring up the salient points of that here and now. So I think back in the like that time, it must have been very weird to be like, oh, these are goth fans, like goth people, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to label this. Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
But then, so all right, nowadays when a zombie movie comes out, right, and it's like takes place in modern day, it's like 2024, and there are zombies all of a sudden, and every single show and every game and every single movie, everybody's like, what are these things, these creatures, these walkers, these ghouls, these
Yeah.
snarlers, these they come up with like 30,000 ridiculous names, like, it's a fucking zombie, man. Like, it's a zombie. And that's kind of like how I feel about the goth thing now. It's
Yeah.
like, it's goth, like, but again, people get so wrapped around this sort of like tribalistic ideology and mentality around it,
Yeah.
and for good reason. I'm not saying it's wrong. When you find your tribe, like I use that term from this like Sebastian Junger book that he wrote. He was a combat correspondent that went to war and was a photojournalist, and he talks about veterans that are coming back from war,
Hmm.
and he talks about finding your tribe, which is like a lot of people need to feel connected to community. I mean, we all kind of do, and that's why you get these like real staunch, like precise adherences to definitions. But I just don't think that it always serves the best interest of the scene, because you're going to disenfranchise the shit out of a lot of people, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said before, like, sure, keep an eye out at the gates, but don't shut them off like completely.
Right.
It
Right.
makes it hard for new people to get in, and the last thing we want is to pick out a historical reference. We don't want another level of the Habsburgs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
Um, but yeah, like talking about like um like the whole music thing and stuff. Like, was it anything in particular that got you into making music way back when, or was it just that you'd always been interested and thought it could be cool?
I mean, a little bit of both, I guess. Like, so, as I mentioned, growing up in a very, very rural environment, this is the early 2000s. So
Yeah.
like we had dial-up internet, which basically didn't work most of the time.
Yeah.
And like, we were, I lived in a very isolated environment at that time of my life. And that was a time of my life where I was becoming extremely curious about the rest of the world, and I
Hmm.
wanted to experience everything, as I think every young person really should, like when you hit that age of like, 15 to 20, where you're
Yeah.
just like, I want to see it all and I want to do it all, and I want to know what's going on out there. Um, but that was amplified for me because I was in a small town. I didn't have a car. I could only go places really like with my friends in my local town, and there was nothing to do there. Literally. I mean, I'm not joking. There's like, we used to just like walk through the woods
Yeah.
because there was nothing to do. But, for me, it became such an escape to like, I remember my parents got satellite television at one point, and we had VH1 Classic, which was so cool
Oh
because at
wow.
night, at like after 10 p.m., there was this like one, VJ or whatever that would play like nothing but like post punk
Yeah.
and new wave and goth, and like that was when I really started getting into it. This is probably around the age of 15 or so. I remember watching. They played this whole BBC interview with the band Specimen,
Hmm.
and it's still one of my favorite things. I'll watch it every now and then just to like get a little inspiration and remember the past and remember like how cool this stuff is and was. But it's Ollie Wisdom and John Klein like being interviewed by this like very, very, very BBC British like older guys, and they're like doing their makeup, and and then it's kind of intercut with like a music video. So
Hmm.
it was the song "Returning from a Journey," which is such a good song. But they're like talking in between parts of the song, and I was just like mesmerized. It was like, being this very unusual kid in a very agrarian society,
Yeah.
like where it's just farms and very close-minded, very, very conservative. And I all of a sudden had these guys who were like very eloquently spoken. They were very smart and savvy, but like on the stage when they showed the live performance, like Ollie Wisdom was like climbing up the scaffold and like throwing bottles, and people were going crazy. And I was like, that is that is what I want to be, is smart and educated and like substantive, but also like I want it to be fun, you know, because I feel like a lot of the times you go into camps that are one or the other. It's either you're like, oh, I'm with the smart people that are kind of boring, or
Yeah.
like the crazy people that have a lot of fun, but they're also kind of idiots.
Exactly.
So to me, it was like such a cool confluence. And yeah, and that's like kind of when I started writing music. I remember I bought a keyboard, like a synthesizer, and I was kind of playing guitar as well. I got more into guitar later down the road, but yeah, it has always been an outlet for me. It has always been something that I can pick up a guitar or keyboard or whatever, and I can literally create something from basically nothing.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the definition of magic, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like jumping off of that, like now that you make music full time and stuff, like um how to phrase it. You used to be a firefighter, you used to have been in
Mm.
the army. What was it that made you take the plunge and just go like full time with music? Was it because you felt like the time was right? And also, what were your initial feelings?
Yeah, I think you're pretty accurate to say that. Like it was, so we came out of the lockdowns of the pandemic, into 2021,
Yeah.
and we started whenever the venues opened back up, we started to play pretty early on. We started like our first tour was in 2021, and things were just very obviously growing on online, and like I never really had it in my mind that it was going to be even possible, because I was like, it's really, really tough. It's
Yeah.
really hard to make a living off of this. And I didn't want to risk giving up, because I loved being a firefighter and a paramedic. I mean, that was the best thing. I think it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done with my life.
Hmm.
And I loved it, but I also saw this like really cool opportunity growing. And then into 2022, uh, it became really apparent because we did a tour, and we, even now we're not making like much money at all, but we're getting by.
Yeah.
And that feeling of seeing that, we weren't quite there yet, but I was like, I think if we just keep going, we'll get there. If
Yeah.
you just keep touring and you put on a good show and you engage with your audience and show them that you actually genuinely give a shit about them, like this will grow to an extent where I feel comfortable leaving. But I also had some like kind of like a safety net to it. That my chief of my fire station came up to me a couple of weeks before I had left, when I had put in my resignation, and he said, hey, look, if you get to the end of next year, or like within 364 days, and you're like, I messed up, I need to come back, we will take you. Like
Mm.
we will absolutely take you, because I worked really hard there, and I showed that I was like a valued member,
Yeah.
and that I was good at what I did. So they said, don't worry, like we want you to succeed. We
Mm.
don't want you to come back, because we want you to feel like you've done the right thing, and that it's working out. But if it doesn't, we've got you. And I was like, okay, that's very good to know.
Yeah.
But
That's
I mean, we hit
comforting.
that, yeah, yeah, and we hit that like last year in the summer, in 2023,
Hmm.
where that I'd gone out of that year period, and that was scary. But I mean, yeah, when I left, I mean, it was like, okay, we really only make money on the road, so let's start touring a lot, like so that we can pay our bills and we can afford to do this. But I mean, also touring is like the fun part anyway. You know, it's the enjoyable aspect of it for me. Like I don't
Oops.
obviously don't mind doing social media stuff, but
Yeah.
to me the point is to like get in front of human beings in person, play your heart out, connect with them. Hopefully it resonates and to me the whole thing of music is like I create a message through this vehicle of this music,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully that translates and gets to the end user.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, then I've done my job, and it's like well done.
Mm-hmm.
But that really, I think, mostly only happens in person
Yeah,
for
it's
me.
it's
Like,
it's kind of hard to like translate onto like online and stuff.
yeah, yeah, it's really hard to evoke emotions through a TikTok video. You know what I mean? Like without being too like desperate or pandering or I don't know. So yeah, it was very scary and it still is. Don't get me wrong. I'm
Yeah.
not like I it's so funny to me because we've grown this massive social media following, and I've experienced this a couple times recently where people are like, "Oh, you must be getting paid by TikTok and Instagram," and I'm like, "Oh no." I wish I were, but I make about, $50 a month off of, TikTok. I'm
Yeah.
not getting anything off Instagram. So, it's a struggle, and it is a grind, but it's honestly it's the first time in my adult life where everything that we do or fail to do is like on our shoulders, and
Yeah.
it's up to how much we want to work and how much we want to put into it. And the more you put into it, the more it grows, and it's just I think that's really cool because I've never been able to experience that before as
Yeah.
an adult.
Yeah, definitely. Um, like in that along that along that line, like people in your like close surroundings, like your
Mm.
former co-workers, family, stuff like that, do they support what you're doing, or are they a little, good luck? Don't Not sure if I
Yeah.
have faith in you, but good luck.
I think pretty much everybody in my family, all my close friends, I've never really had any level of resistance to it because I think people saw how serious I was about it. And anybody that was maybe a little questioning it or something, I told them, "Hey, come to the show and I'll show you what we do.
Yeah.
And I'll show you why I think at least that this is a wise decision." Because I mean, again, not to harp on it too much, but like our power is in our live performance.
Yeah.
People that have seen us live, I think generally, yeah, I'm a fan. Personally, I'm a fan of our own music more live than on the recordings
Yeah. Okay.
because it just feels more visceral and raw and real. And I don't know how to always capture that in recordings.
Yeah, that is an art, I've been told. I'm not a musician myself, but I've been told that getting to a point where everything you feel and do in music like that translates properly into the music, that's an art,
Right,
I've been told.
right.
Um, but yeah, like speaking of the whole music and touring and things like obviously you've already gotten some pretty nice tour lineups going ahead already. Like I saw you doing tours with like Aurelio Voltaire. I saw you touring
Hmm.
with, was it the Chameleons I saw a post about the other day?
Yeah, yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool. Like,
Yeah, we're going to be running with Voltaire, Then Comes Silence, and Tears for the Dying throughout pretty much most of the United States.
yeah.
And then the Chameleons are coming here actually. So I can like kind of soft announce this. Don't tell anybody yet,
Shh.
those of you that are listening. But I'll kind of like give you the info early because it's tomorrow that we're announcing this. But the Chameleons are actually going to headline our festival here in Athens, Georgia, which is in October. It's like a sort of a Halloween festival called the Southern Gothic. So they're going to be here with us then.
Oh, that's
And
so
then we will
cool.
be going with them to the UK and Ireland in December. So yeah, and I'm they're like without a doubt my favorite band.
Yeah.
So I am Whew, yeah, we've played with them once before, and I've gotten to meet Mark, and he's such a sweet guy and just such an incredible musician. Very, he's got this like beautiful seriousness to him,
Hmm.
but he's also very friendly, and I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be cool.
it definitely sounds like it's gonna be cool. But like, yeah, like regarding touring, if there is anywhere in the world where you haven't toured yet, where would you like to tour? Why would you like to go there? I mean, there's
Oh,
obviously plenty of places you haven't been
yeah,
yet, but
yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I have been to Japan twice now on my own time, but I love Japan. My partner Scarlett loves Japan.
mhm,
I actually met a couple promoters there, so I'm hoping that like one day it'll make sense to go there. It's just so hard to get there and then figure out the logistics. There's plenty of places to play and do it. It's just
yeah,
like figuring out the logistics is the hard part. But Japan, Korea is on the list. I've never been to Korea, but I really, really love Korean food, and it just seems like such a cool place. And then honestly, I would love to go back again. I've been there, but I've never performed there. But anywhere in Australia
mhm,
and New Zealand would be amazing as well.
yeah,
But additionally, though, like and literally anywhere in South America, which I've not been to, um, I'm hoping to figure out some like shows in Mexico, or somewhere, Central America and South America, because there's like huge audiences for this kind
yeah.
of music there, and we are always getting requests to come. But again, logistics,
Hmm.
figuring it all out, that's the hard part. So, but I think um, next year, especially, we will be like really going all over the place.
Yeah.
It's going to be cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing, and like hopefully it's all gonna work out because it would be great for you to go all these places and for your fans all over the place to get to see you guys.
Yeah.
Because like based on like again, I've listened to your music and also based on like little bits of what I've seen here and there, you guys really seem like you put on a fun show. So yeah, I definitely have you guys on my bucket list whenever you make it within a reasonable
Yeah.
vicinity of Denmark, be it like Denmark itself or Sweden or northern
Yeah.
Germany. I'll come see you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're definitely going to be coming back to Europe in late November this year. We just recently signed to a new booking agency specific to Europe,
Hmm.
and that's called Persona Grata. They handle a lot of like post-punk and goth bands. So I'm really excited because Xavier, the guy who leads Persona Grata, is directly booking for us. So it's just really it's going to be a cool experience. I think it'll open some really good doors to some good venues because we've done Europe a couple times this last year, but they the shows were great and the turnout was good,
Hmm.
but the venues were like not always the best for that kind of music,
Uh,
or like the promoters weren't people in that world,
yeah.
so they didn't really know like who to promote to basically,
Ah,
which I
right,
mean,
right.
I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have gone
Yeah,
over
yeah.
to
I
Europe.
mean, you have to start somewhere.
Exactly, and it's really hard. Like touring in the United States is so easy
Hmm.
compared to touring in Europe. It's so much easier. I hate to say it. I wish it was easier in Europe, so because we would just spend all of our time there.
Oh, I can imagine that touring comes with its own hurdles, regardless if you're like European and wanting to tour in the US or vice versa.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, because there's so many things that are different from, insurance perspective, from like cost perspective, all
right.
those things.
Yeah, I mean, like our friends, we're really close with the guys from near your neck of the woods, from Then Comes Silence in
Yeah,
Sweden, and we did a run with them in Sweden in like the end of the year,
yeah,
I guess November. But they like I'm talking to Alex a lot right now because we're planning everything for this tour that we're going to do with them, and it's really tough for them, and it's like I'm trying to find ways to save them money
hmm,
because it's so crazy expensive. It's expensive for us to go to Europe, but it's nowhere near because like a typical standard American sort of being conceited in our ways, I guess. Like we require artists to get this like really crazy expensive visa here,
Mm,
whereas in Europe it's like it's very inexpensive. It's like $200.
yeah.
I think for them to come, it's like 3,000 per person or something crazy. But
Wow.
it lasts like 18 months. But it's like I'm so it's like why why wouldn't we want more artists like people who have to prove that they are like in bands or artists to come and perform on tour. It just doesn't make any sense. Like there
Hmm.
should be no real significant limitations to art being able to travel.
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, I
so
mean, I agree. There's like so many good bands where I'm like, people, please, if they finally make it to your end of the woods, please go see them because you never
right,
know if it's gonna be like the only time or it's gonna be like 5, 10 years before they come back.
right, and things change. Like I remember in 2019, I think it was. I really like this Italian band called Soviet, and they came to America, and they got stuck in the airport and like not really arrested, but they
Hmm.
were not allowed to leave and were deported back to Italy because of a clerical error on a sheet, like just
Wow.
some mistake, and they like lost a lot of money because they had to fly back, and they had this whole tour planned, and like I had tickets and I had to like get a refund for the tickets, and it's like I almost I told the venue, I was like, oh, I can I just give the money to the band? They were like, no, we just have to refund it, it's contractual. And I was like, this is crazy. Like,
Uh huh.
and it's just a technicality, and like whatever that thing was, I think has since changed. So yeah, you don't ever know, like if somebody's coming from another country, it's like you should really go see them because you
Yeah.
never know, like you said.
Yeah. Oh man, the stress of it all. Like I would die from stress if something like that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
to happen.
it's definitely scary.
Uh huh.
Like we got stuck in Canadian customs going to Calgary for a Terminus festival
Hmm.
last year, and like it's my fault because I they asked when you go through Canadian customs on this computer screen, they said, "Do you have anything that you're selling in the country?" And I said no, and then they were like, we're walking through the customs with all this like bags of gear and shit," and the guy was like, "You need to come with me," and I was like, "Ah,"
Oh
and he
no.
opened the bag and it's all T-shirts and records and stuff, and he's like, "So you said that you're not selling anything?" And I was like, "Oh, I misunderstood." I just was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, you knew exactly what you're doing." I'm like, it's my fault. I'll pay whatever penalty." He's like, "No, we're just gonna give you a warning." and
Mm.
and I was like, "Oh God," I was so like scared. But that was also scary too because like the keyboard and my guitar got stuck in customs
Oh
too,
no.
and they wouldn't release it for some reason, and we were like freaking out because the customs guys were like leaving for the weekend or
Uh
for
huh.
the day, and we were like, man, we're playing tomorrow, like we have sound check, we need all this stuff.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting it all back because this like one really gracious person helped us, and it was awesome. But it's a lot of stress, like,
Hmm.
oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's why I always admire when bands are like willing to travel far and wide for what they do because
Yeah,
like there's a lot of logistics and it's not just about scoring venues to play. Even though I
right,
know that's a big part of it too. Like I've spoken
yeah,
to other musicians on here and like I've been told that sometimes venues won't take a chance in
yeah,
in grabbing a band because they're not sure if they can sell tickets and stuff, and I'm just like, it's really
yeah.
not easy.
It's very difficult, and sometimes like venues will cancel shows if
Yeah.
there's no pre-sale or whatever. And yeah, like there's so many aspects to think about, and like what if you get hurt or
Yeah.
really sick or like any other number of crazy things that can happen. So yeah, it's stressful, but at the end of the day, it's really fun,
Hmm.
and it's really amazing to like go to a place that you've never even heard of. Like we played at this place in the Netherlands called Heerlen,
Hmm.
and it's this like small, beautiful little city. I don't even know if I'd call it a city, more of a village or whatever. But um, it's a beautiful place. And we had like, maybe 30, 40 people show up to our first time ever there.
Yeah.
And it was just so cool to be like, wow, like I can't believe that this music that I've made has like reached so many people, that we can come to a place like this, and people will come out and support us. And it's a beautiful thing. It's really, really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, like, even just 10 people showing up to see what you've done, that's amazing, especially if you don't know what to expect. Like,
Yes.
it's not quite the same thing, but like when I DJ here on Twitch, even if there's just 5 people, I'm happy because it's like it's 5 people. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine being at a bar and there's 5 people just vibing to the music you're
Yeah.
playing, or 10 or 20, or it
It,
doesn't have to be like hundreds or thousands.
exactly.
As long as those few people are having a great time, that's what matters to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, some of my favorite shows that we've ever played have been in front of 10 people,
Yeah.
like it happens sometimes. Like we will sell 500 tickets in LA, but when we go to, some small towns, it's just like I believe in playing in small towns,
Yeah.
because I don't think that you should have to always travel all the time. And we can't always do it, but all of our tours, we put in a lot of smaller cities and
Hmm.
smaller towns, because I just think it's such a cool thing. Because I grew up in a small town. Like
Yeah.
Athens is not a big area, and we have a good music scene here, but a lot of bands don't come here. They go to Atlanta.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a different energy when you're in a small group that's like really, really happy to see you.
Yeah.
And likewise. So
Yeah, like, what are the long-term goals of you guys? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish in the future? Aside from
yeah.
fame and fortune and all that jazz.
Ah. Oh, I don't know. I think if fame is definitely overrated and a very hollow thing to chase after, to be able to earn a living would
Yeah.
be nice. That's like more stable than what it is now, but it's definitely not the goal, I'd say. I think it's a sad thing that we live in a world where like musicians and artists have to like do very, very well to have a future.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's just a day where you quit and you like go back to normal work or whatever. Um, but I think for me, it's like uh, I would like to play some really big venues,
Hmm.
just to see what the energy is like in a 5,000 capacity room, like maybe open for some large bands, like The Cure or something. That would be like that would be the top like of goals for
Yeah.
me, is like
The
something that's
dream.
super big. Yeah. But I mean, in some ways, like I said, like the Chameleons is my favorite band, and it's like it's really a band that is not massive. I mean, they're pretty huge band, but they're not like majorly huge.
Yeah.
And that's like incredible. So I guess in some ways I have like achieved some of that. And I you know I try not to think about it in like goals too much, to be completely honest, because I
Hmm.
think when you sort of set too many strict goals on things in art, it can be kind of limiting for yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's more important to just like focus on the work and on the creation of it, and allowing yourself to 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 be fulfilled in what you're doing. But at the same time, on the other side of the coin, you do have to pay your bills. Like I
Yeah.
do have to pay for things and survive. So there is the business element that hopes that it becomes more stable, and just a bit bigger.
Hmm.
But even if like I had a stroke right now and I dropped to the floor and I was never able to play music again, I wouldn't, I don't think I would feel like I had not done so much already,
Hmm.
and experienced so much of what I wanted to do out of this. And the what it really boils down to is just like connecting to people, and understanding that like all these songs that I write are for me first,
Yeah.
and then I hope that they're for everybody else also.
Yeah.
And I try to write in a general way. So knowing that, and being confident in saying like, yeah, I've seen these crowds of people say like, this song has helped me get through this time,
Hmm.
or whatever. Like that's the most satisfying thing you can do. Uh, but I don't know. I think like what we were talking about, like just being able to tour in different parts of the world because I love to travel. I've always kind of tried to travel as much as I can in my
Hmm.
life, and it would be amazing to just be in a totally different environment and be
Yeah,
challenged in that way. Yeah, I think that's a big goal for sure.
most definitely. Like, so we've talked about like who you'd want to tour with and stuff.
Mm.
Like in terms of adjacent to that, if if you could pick anyone to collaborate with, should you do a collaboration, who would that be and why?
Mm.
Or if there's a
Oof.
producer you would want to get some studio time with, who and why?
Yeah.
Like,
I think, one day I would like to do something with Jason Corbett from Actors. He's a
mm-hmm,
really phenomenal musician and an incredible producer. So that would be really cool for me. Um, I would like to do something maybe totally out of the normal wheelhouse for us. And I would like, if I was ever to do like choose one band to do a remix for us, I would choose probably this band from Los Angeles called Spike Hellis.
mm-hmm,
They're like kind of an industrial electronic body music band that's just they're like probably the best like band I've seen of the modern era live. Like their live performance is so good. It's so engaging. It's so intense and it's just fun. It's just like everybody gets dancing and it's like it's super loud, but
yeah.
it's like you feel it. And yeah, I love the way that they compose their music, and I think doing like a remix with them would be really fun. Um and then I don't know, like I've always thought it would be really fun to write a duet with like Tori Amos or something like that. Like something really stripped down and simple and beautiful. That
Yeah.
would be cool.
Oh, that's so neat. But also like, I mean, in this kind of business, you can dream big, and it may or may never happen. If it does,
Right.
then it's fantastic. If not, that's
Right.
okay too. I mean, that's what dreams are
Exactly.
for. They're not supposed to happen. Dreams and goals are not the same thing after all.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. And I mean, like I remember when we first started like really getting our music out there
mhm.
like in 2021 and just being like, the things that I wanted to do, we've kind of done in a lot of ways, and that's very freeing in a lot of ways once you've kind of achieved some of these goals.
Yeah.
Because, like, not to sound pretentious, but like once you've achieved these goals that you think are like almost impossible,
Mhm.
you go, okay, well, what's next? And
Yeah.
it really just allows me to put my mind more towards, like I said, the creation of the art
Yeah.
and like how to be a better musician, like how to improve the show, how to
Mhm.
make it more engaging and more fun
Yeah.
for both the audience and for us on stage, and just just growing it in different ways, and like the next thing for us is like we're we're playing now with in-ear monitors into like a click track, so everything is like very tight
Mhm.
and it sounds great, but like the one of the really cool benefits of doing that is that like you can sequence lights so that it's like at certain points of the song, like the drummer has like a trigger pad and he
Uh
can
huh.
like hit a trigger, like, and every time he hits that trigger like something happens,
Yeah.
and I'm also really interested in like video manipulation, like live video manipulation, where you have like a camera down like at a certain place or like on a balcony or whatever that's
Mhm.
pointed at the band, and then it's like a screen behind you and there's like
Ah,
cool
right.
stuff happening in real time. There's just so many cool things you can do. So I think my goals have more shifted towards like things like that, like more literal,
Yeah.
like performative things that we can do.
Yeah, to be able to
And
like create really really cool live shows and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, because my goal now is like I want every single person that comes to see us walking away with an experience and not just like, oh, that was just some band that I saw. Because I think it's pretty easy to put on a show. It's hard and challenging to give people an experience and something that they value and will remember. Because I've had a lot of those experiences. I've seen both ends. I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of bands that just sort of phone it in live and just play the songs, and then they're just like, "Thank you, we got merch in the back. We'll see you later."
Yeah.
And then I've seen bands that come and it's like a religious experience, and you're like, "Holy shit, this is insane! Like
Yeah.
this is amazing." And that's what I hope that's like when I will feel fully vindicated is like when when we have it to where I am sort of getting it in my mind,
Hmm.
we have all these pieces together. I want it to be like people walk away from it and be like, what did I just see? Like, what? That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
So that's the goal.
yeah, like to me personally, I don't know if people in chat are feeling the same way, but I think you and I feel the same. Like, I feel the best after shows if I feel like whoa when I leave the venue.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's oftentimes it's really not like the sound quality or like how well did they play or like it's it's like how did they connect to the
Yeah,
audience?
exactly.
How did they just stand there or they're running around and going crazy and like was there energy? Was it
Yeah.
did it feel like I said, an event, something, an experience, not just like people standing on a stage to play music.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we can all just listen to music anytime we want. You can literally hit a button, and anything you ever wanted to listen to is like readily available.
Hmm.
So you have to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And so much of our music is so deeply personal, as I mean, as is most people's. But for me, it's a lot of like not fun subjects
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
memories and things like that I get catharsis and I exercise those memories by that process and that physicality and going crazy and getting that energy out. And I always feel better when I come home from a tour than I
Hmm.
did when I started the tour every single time.
Yeah, but also because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like listening to your music, it's also very clear that like the song themes that you pull into are like based on stuff that you've experienced, or at least the how to explain it, the vibe of what you've
Yeah.
experienced without
Yeah.
necessarily being super concrete.
Exactly. Yeah, I write in generalities so
Yeah.
that you don't have to be like a former firefighter to understand like the way that something feels like loss or like for me a lot of it is my post-traumatic stress disorder and my brain uh constantly battling my own brain,
Hmm.
and I never wanted to write songs literally. I wanted
Yeah.
to be very figurative so that I could connect because I understood that very early on. It's like if I write solely about war or write solely about like burning buildings or like
Yeah.
horrible medical trauma or whatever, like it's going to be it's like too on the nose and it's too literal.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like it would either scare people away, or it
mm,
would, on the opposite end, risk drawing in the completely wrong crowd you might not be interested
exactly.
in
Right.
wanting as your following
Exactly.
necessarily, given
Right.
like what I've seen on your social media and stuff.
Right. Right. Oh, very much so. Yeah, I have to be very careful, about those worlds colliding, and they
Hmm.
do often, and it is not fun having to sift through so many like hateful nasty comments
Yeah,
from
I can
just people
imagine.
who are so politicized, and it's like America is a weird place right now, I'll put it
Uh-huh.
that way. It's not a fun time here. There's a lot of really wonderful people in America, and there's a lot of people that want things to change for the better. I think most people want things to change for the better,
Hmm.
and even the people that are very politicized and into one camp or another, they believe that their ideologies are for the better, but they're just being manipulated by forces that they can't even begin to understand because they assume that these like are people looking out for them. And I just don't believe that either side, one side very much so obviously doesn't
Hmm.
give a
Hmm.
shit about anybody, and then the other side is like hit or miss
Yeah.
depending on the politician.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. It's really hard. And I mean, like we're constantly having to question everything now. I
Hmm.
look at like Joe Biden, and I voted for Joe Biden and I wanted him to be a good president, but he's doing things now like supporting you know, extreme military expenditure. But and that would like, you know, like for example, like I support like the defense of Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
because I support people having sovereignty and self-determination, and I in theory have no problem with giving money or whatever we need to help them defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we are not like doing anything in the United States to take care of people at all that need a lot of help.
Yeah.
And like we have no healthcare system that is functioning. We have massive amounts of debt because people have to pay huge amounts of money to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that it's like so two-faced to see them say, "Oh, look, we're going to help and we're going to do all this. We're going to give all this to help people be free and happy and safe." And then that's like, well, what are we doing here? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
are we really doing here? It's like if you're going to do one, you have to do both.
Yeah.
And so anyway, not to go too far into politics, it's just a very bizarre time to be an American. And
I
I still
imagine.
love it here, but I am also missing Germany a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
But yeah,
it's okay.
like yeah, like as someone in the comments is saying regarding what you mentioned before about, you know, getting everything out via music, someone's saying that music is therapy, and I for one wholeheartedly agree on that one.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes. No doubt about that.
And there are people in the chat who are saying that who apparently have seen you before somewhere.
Oh, cool.
That that's what they liked about your show. That like you had a message with the music you were playing, and it wasn't in a way that seemed like that's how I read the comment is that they had messages, and to me that also reads like it didn't seem like you were pandering to anyone, but just being
Right.
like, this is what we sing about. This is our status quo.
Yeah.
Here you go,
Yeah,
people.
I think it's very easy for musicians to like get on stage and be like, "Oh, we need to care."
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just sort of like, "All right, cool." But the essence of everything that I have been through, it's sort of like coded into the story
Yeah.
of me and the music that I write and that we write. Um, so I feel like it's almost disingenuous to not talk about these things at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And you have to read the audience. Sometimes it doesn't go over well, sometimes it does. But I only say things that I know to be true and that I believe in truly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't tell people like that they're terrible people for believing in anything contrary to what I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
I try to remind people that like music and art uh, serves a very special place in the political theater,
Yeah.
and it can help change because I believe in like this kind of notion of the collective subconscious, like
Mm-hmm.
where we, you don't if it's like talking about these things isn't inherently going to change anything, and I'm of no delusion to believe that me
Mm-hmm.
getting in front of a crowd of a couple hundred people saying, war is bad is
Yeah.
like not going to change anything. But it does make people remember, like, okay, maybe I need to read more and maybe I need to pay more attention to where money is going and
Mm-hmm.
where politicians are putting power behind this thing or that thing. And just it's like it's all about accountability. It's about like total accountability, which I think is an important thing.
Yeah. And like it's not, and you also come across as the sort of person where like you stand by what you say, and you don't mind getting proven wrong if that should happen. Um,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not I am by no means like some genius or anything, like I consider myself like well read. I read a lot. I pay attention to what's going on in the world a lot, and I try to find information from different kinds of sources that sometimes contradict each other.
mhm.
Uh but ultimately, like I think that it's like it's a weird gray area, and I shouldn't be the end all be all of people's opinion, and I certainly don't want to sort of like pre-package opinions and just hand it to people and go, hey, just believe in what I believe in,
Yeah.
because I might be wrong. There's a lot of things that I might be wrong about. I don't think I am, but I mean, that's there we again, this all sort of goes back to that sentiment of being on one side or the other.
Mhm.
And when that happens, and we become so entrenched in ideology and an identity of the ideology, then anything that says, hey, well, have you thought about this, and here's the evidence, that can be like
Hmm.
viciously perceived as like an attack
Yeah.
on the person and not the subject at hand.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's
yeah,
like
it just sucks.
it's like some people are really not good at reading nuances anymore.
Right. Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah. I
as I'm sure
think
you
that
must have experienced
social
in
media
socials.
has, yeah, it's all social media's fault, because again, these algorithms only bring up extremes,
Mm.
right? Like think about, and this is like my proof, and this is how I always prove to people that the algorithms and social media are the fault of like everything being terrible now.
Hmm.
Think about 90% of the music that you actually see on social media. It's not good. It's kind of bad.
Hmm.
But because people hate on it so much,
Yeah.
it gets shown to you.
Yeah.
So, like when you see bands like putting their stuff out there, and every once in a while you'll see something amazing and you'll be like, I've never heard of this. Yeah, because
Yeah, and
they're
then
doing
you figure out it's like a band that's been around for like 10 years or something, and you're like,
exactly
why didn't I notice this before?
right. So it's the same concept, but with like truth and facts and like this sort of getting into these camps where these modalities of thought where it's like I'm in this way,
Yeah.
and whenever they post something that's somebody comes in and says no you're wrong, and then they
Yeah.
get into arguments, that algorithm just shoots that out into the stratosphere because it sees that people are staying on that product, that
Hmm.
Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and that is like cancer. That is literal cultural cancer,
Yes.
because it is a group of cells that is multiplying metastatically out of control, and nothing can stop it because that algorithm just says, yeah, more people want to see this because it's stupid.
Yeah.
And you'll never see like a mild mannered like discussion about politics on a post, because it'll be seen by like 10 people,
Yeah, exactly.
it's
Exactly.
so
As
ridiculous.
someone in chat says, it's all echo chambers.
Yep,
And
exactly. Yeah.
and like also given some of my background, like the way I grew up, because like my dad, he worked for the government and stuff. He was a
Mhm.
diplomat. So like I've always been taught to like view stuff from multiple directions and try
Right.
to gain as many viewpoints as possible to not try and get too tangled up in like an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And that's something I
Yeah.
still adhere to, and not only apply in terms of politics, but also in terms of music. So, like, I don't exclusively listen to one thing.
Yeah.
Um, there's also
Yeah, that would
some,
be pretty boring.
yeah,
That
for
would be very
sure.
boring.
There's also someone in chat who says that, like, me talking to you and them like getting into your music, they say it's refreshing to come across a band in the alternative scene where you don't have to like Google them to hell to figure out if there's a problem with them, because you come across as really unproblematic and easy to follow and stuff.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean,
So it's not like we're
to
gonna
my
have any
knowledge,
Twitter
to
scandals in
my,
10 years or
no,
something.
to my knowledge, I don't think I've ever done anything that's like truly horrible. I mean,
Mm.
I haven't, I mean, we've all like been nasty to somebody in our life
Yeah,
or
and everyone has
done
been young and
something.
stupid at some point.
Yeah, yeah. But I like, I, I hope that I've never done anything that's like super horrible, and I hope to not let people down. I always tell people like, don't build too much of a cult of personality around anybody, myself included.
Mm.
I try to be a good person. I've always, I was raised by two amazing parents, uh, and a collection of other people that helped guide me to doing things in a moral way that I think I've stood by pretty much my whole adult life, and but it's hard because like, I had a guy on TikTok recently
Hmm.
who's like somebody that I supported heavily, who ended up being exposed as like I don't even want to say it on the stream, like some of the things that he did to like children,
Oh
and
god,
and
yeah,
and
bad
yeah, and it's
things.
like like took advantage and manipulative of not only like young teenage girls, but
Hmm.
just like women in general. Um, and this is not somebody that I ever would have thought you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, so it's
It's
always
always a
hard.
shock when it's the people you
Yeah.
don't expect to be like
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
like, ugh, no.
Yeah. But, that's, yeah. Well, thank you though. I'm glad that I at least appear, that way. And I hope that I continue to stand by my morality and ethics and
Yeah.
stay out of trouble. I don't know. Oh man.
Yeah, like you definitely come across as like one of the really good guys in the goth scene right now, and like someone in chat also said earlier that the way that you present stuff also to like younger goths, like also through your whole character of goth dad and all that,
Hmm.
that's exactly what we need in the scene because again,
Yeah.
Ari, all the gatekeeping and stuff, we also need people who are willing to be like, yeah, well,
Yeah.
you can come and play with us, but here's the rules and here's what we
Right.
are about.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I'm digging more into that side of content
Mm-hmm.
now. Like I have been sort of, I haven't like somebody asked me the other day, is like, you haven't really done like the whole like Midwestern goth dad thing for a while, and I was like, yeah, because I've been writing. I mean, we've
Yeah.
been in the studio, and it's just hard. It's just like really hard, and I don't really have like a ton of great ideas around like, oh hi there, baby bats, let me show you how to make like grilled cheese sandwiches, like stuff like that. It's just
Yeah.
fun. But the way I have sort of shifted my plans for that character and whatnot is more of a gentle but relatively firm, like, hey, I'm going to tell you all the things that I believe about the goth scene that
Mm-hmm.
have led me into a healthy scene that has allowed my friends and I to create a healthy scene from scratch. And here are just some like tips and my perceptions and what I think will benefit you. But of course, these aren't placeholders,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying that this is like goth gospel, like this
Yeah.
isn't the book, this isn't they're the unholy book of goth.
It's not the Ten
um
Commandments of God or
right,
anything.
right, this is just like my experience with it and my perceptions and how I have interacted with it and how I think it will be served
Mm-hmm.
best moving forward. And that will ruffle feathers because like there are a lot of people on TikTok, for example, that are like, "Oh, there's no rules to like what makes a goth band goth," and I'm like, "Eh,
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's like again, rich coming from me, from where there's people that are. If you want to read some fun stuff, just go to Reddit
Yeah.
on the r/goth subreddit and just type in Vision Video, and there are a whole bunch of bastards that are just like sitting in their basement complaining about Vision Video, which I don't honestly mind. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're helping spread the word,
Yeah, I
so whatever.
mean, to some people, bad exposure is still exposure, I
Oh
guess.
yeah, it's a little disheartening, but it's like whatever.
Yeah, because like,
I've thick skin from many years of doing crazy stuff. So, but you know, I want there to be a sense of what it is, but not so staunch and so rigid that it precludes innovation.
mm-hmm.
Innovation is so important to subcultural music and music in general, because if like, for example, like I saw this comment yesterday on this Instagram post, and somebody said like, "Oh, I really like all these goth bands that are coming out, but I really don't understand anybody that mixes goth with hip hop, and I don't like it." And I'm like, okay, well, just because it's not for you doesn't mean that it can't fit into this world.
Exactly.
Like we blend so many genres in goth, in that umbrella, the goth umbrella.
Yeah.
There's so many, like dub and reggae are, blended blended in from the beginning with
Mm-hmm.
Bauhaus, and like, you know, Sisters of Mercy, or not Sisters of Mercy, but Susie and the Banshees,
Yeah.
and like so many of those bands in the post-punk movement were like obsessed with dub. Um, and So anyway, it's like some of that stuff's just like it's a dog whistle racism.
Mm-hmm.
to be honest. That's what I find it as is
Yeah,
like, oh, you can't do this and that in the scene. Like, oh, bullshit. You want to see it?
yeah. I
Go
mean,
look up the fact that Public Enemy ran a tour with Sisters of Mercy at one point in the late 80s.
mhm.
Like, you can there absolutely can be a confluence of different genres, and it still can work within this realm of goth. But again, it has to have nuance. Nuance is like the term of the chat is
Yes.
nuance.
Today's code word is nuance.
Exactly.
But like, yeah, really, I also see like because I frequent both the goth scene but also the metal scene because the metal scene is bigger here than the goth
Yeah.
scene
Oh
is.
yeah. I've actually
Um,
been to a metal show in Copenhagen,
yeah,
and it was amazing. It was
and
so much fun.
like it's kind of the same discourse but like in two different places because in the metal scene there's also like quite often a bit of gatekeeping about what real metal is,
Yeah.
and like I also find it really funny, especially in the metal scene when people are like, meh, so and so band is so gay, like Judas Priest would
Yeah.
never call that metal, and I'm just like, my dude, do
Like,
you
do
know
you
about Rob
know?
Halford?
As one of the world's gayest men,
Yes,
and I mean,
like he's the
obviously,
reason that most of the metal environment is wearing leather for
yeah,
crikey's
exactly.
sake.
Hell bent for leather. I mean, who could have seen it coming?
I know, right? I mean, like it's just to me it's just funny that some people are so willing to like argue about what's true goth, what's true metal. It makes no
Yeah,
sense to me.
yeah,
Like because I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a goth to like goth music, and you can definitely also be a goth and like stuff that isn't goth music. And
right.
also like the people who are like, oh, but you can't be a goth if you have like back to the whole hater thing. Like
Yeah,
you can't be a goth if you like get played on popular radio. And then I'm just like
it's
gesturing
like,
at again the bands in the like 80s and
yeah,
80s and 90s who were played heavily on commercial radio.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, you know, the one of the litmus tests of whether it works in the goth world or not is like go to a goth night that plays a pretty diverse range of music and just request a song.
Yeah,
And if the DJ goes, then it might not be.
yeah.
But I mean, who cares? Like at the end of the day, it is just a word, and
Yeah.
it's a word that was never intended to be a thing anyway. So it's like just let it go and enjoy your scene, enjoy your community. Like most scenes will sort of regulate their interpretation of these things anyway, right? So
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
when you go to a goth night, like you might go to a goth night, like you might come to ours and see the fact that we're playing a lot of like 80s, like kind of new wavy pop music. Not a lot, but like here and there. And that might be like totally distasteful for some people that
Yeah.
are on the extreme end of it. But then there's other people that like, you could go to a goth night where they're playing like nothing but that. And I've been to those. I've been to them and I've had just as much fun. Honestly, I've had more fun at the ones that are just somewhere in the middle where it's
Yeah.
like a lot of like true blue goth rock where it's like super obscure, like
Yeah,
late
yeah,
80s,
because
whatever.
also because at one point your brain just becomes tired. It's like because you just hear the same constant droning all the time. It's the
Yeah.
same if you go into like a more like EBM oriented event and you can't hear where
Yeah.
one track starts and another ends. And I know that in the case of goth rock, some editions of, for example, this corrosion is like 10 years long,
Oh
but
yeah. Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but
Yeah,
like
it's but I think what it really boils down to is just like, are you having fun? Do you feel like you found community? Do you feel like the music identifies a part of your being, your essence?
yeah,
And does is it a fun interaction within that infrastructure? And if the answer is yes, then you're good. The rest of it is like it's just semantics and
yeah.
it's just not to be worried about.
Exactly, and just to correct anyone who's watching out there, no, I absolutely do not hate this corrosion. I love it. I think it's a fun track, but I also do think it's a little bit funny sometimes when you go to one of those goth nights and you can't really hear where one track ends
Mm,
and another begins, because either that's the hallmark of a extremely good DJ, or a lot of the
mm.
music they're playing back to back is sounding very, 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 very alike.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and like, yeah, to me, like when I DJ here on Twitch, it's also like I tend to like go a little bit here, there, and everywhere in terms of genre,
yeah.
which my viewers will confirm. Like I've done
Right.
some pretty wild shifts in music. Like
That's
one
good.
moment
That's
I'll
good.
play goth music, the next I'll be playing EBM or 80s, or occasionally I've even thrown in some more like contemporary popish kind of music, because I
Yeah,
felt
yeah.
like it worked with what I was already playing.
Right. Well, and
Because
then there's also the reality that like, sometimes like yeah, I listen to like I don't even know. I don't have any examples off
mhm,
the top of my head, but like there's a lot of like modern pop music. Oh, like The Weekend.
yeah,
Like any of
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
is like he literally samples like Happy House in his first album. And it's like a goth. I mean, it's basically Happy House, but with like a hip hop kind of vibe going over the top of it. But like that song is awesome, and
hmm,
there's a bunch of that music from The Weekend that I'm like, this works in this world.
yeah,
But you play it,
definitely.
and people get upset, and you're like, dude, just relax. Like, just listen to this cool song. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Just enjoy it.
I always have the policy regarding my stream that if you don't like the music I play, you don't have to stay here. Or
Yep.
if you want to stay and support me, use those 3 minutes to go and grab a cigarette or a drink or
Yeah.
whatever, and then come
Yeah.
back later. That's
There you
how
go.
I feel about it, and I think I would be feeling pretty much the same way, like if I were playing in a club and it wasn't like super genre specific, but they just were like, "Hey, we're running this thing. This is roughly what we're planning. Go ahead and have fun."
Right.
I would just be
Right.
like, "Okay, let's see what we can find. Let's see
Exactly.
what we can combine, make sound fun."
Right. Right. I like
Um,
that.
Let me just check the time here. All right. I think I have a couple more questions and then we can wrap up, unless you have more to tell me, because I'm always open to talk. I
No,
love talking
no,
to people.
it sounds good.
Um, let's see, where was the question? I've heard some rumors of you guys. Like you mentioned, you were working on some new stuff. Like,
Mhm.
is it anything you can tell about right now?
Yeah. We were originally going to go into the studio in February and finish this record that we kind of started last year, which you've kind of heard some of the songs, maybe like Normalized
Yeah,
and the new version of In My Side
yeah, I
and
love that
Never
version.
Enough. Yeah, it's really cool. It's totally different. It's like the same song, it's just very different.
Different
But
energy.
yeah, different energy, exactly. And we were going to finish that, but we were writing so like right when we got back from tour in November, like Jason left the band,
Yeah.
and Dan, who had still been in the band, he was a bass player, but he only really wrote with us, and then he would play like a couple shows, mostly local. And he's a professor of biochemical engineering at the university here, so he's like super busy now. And so he left as well, because he's like, I literally cannot get
Yeah.
the time to write and then go to record. So it was just Emily and I, and in some ways that was kind of nice, because it's a lot easier to not have to balance four people's schedule, but it's also a detriment because both of them are great musicians and they added a lot. But we realized that this record is going to take a very different turn, and it became like very interesting, because we would write something here in the studio room, and I'd be like, "Well, what do you think of this?" And Emily'd be like, "Oh, that's great," or I don't really like that. And it was a binary. It's like if it was cool, we kept it. If it wasn't, we got rid of it.
Yeah.
So we just started writing and writing and writing and writing, and we have probably 8 songs, and we decided, okay, instead of going into the studio with these 8 songs that are all kind of almost finished, let's work on 3 of them that are definitely done. We'll go to the studio, we'll record that, and then we'll come back in the summer. We'll finish the other like 5 or 6, and then we will have 12 songs on this record, and we'll be done.
Yeah.
Um, and that worked really well because we went to the studio a week and a half ago
Hmm.
and recorded 3 new songs, and they are so fun. I keep telling people this next record, which is called Modern Horror, that's sort of it's not really a concept album. It's just sort of like it's very angry and a little more political, but not like overtly.
Yeah.
It's just like music to get energized to go to a protest to maybe or something. But I keep telling people it's shaping up to sound like if Billy Idol and Steve Stevens wrote a goth album,
Oh, that sounds like
basically.
a cool idea
It's
in my
very,
ears.
yeah, it's cool. It's very like big guitars. It's very like rock and roll. Like it. We wrote this song called Balaclava Kiss
Hmm.
because I saw this image. I don't even know what it was from, and I can't remember where I saw it, but I remember seeing an image a couple months ago of this woman holding like an AK-47 or something, and she was taking her balaclava up, like a ski mask,
Uh huh.
up to kiss somebody. And I was like, I just loved that image because it was like revolutionary,
Hmm.
but also like uh it was set, like the contrast of it was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
um and that's kind of a lyric in that song Balaclava Kiss. That's but anyway, that song is like very Billy Idol. And then there's this other song called Haunt Your Dreams that we wrote. And this one is more Bauhausy.
Hmm.
It's got this kind of like really creepy vibe. And it's kind of a song about I wrote it's sort of a metaphor, but it's kind of from the point of view of a ghost or a murdered person to a serial killer, basically.
Yeah.
But it's actually a big metaphor for like people and groups that have been marginalized and disenfranchised and murdered by like governments or agents of state.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a little heady. I mean, in the song itself, it's more kind of literal,
Yeah.
but it's a big metaphor, and it's got this kind of love era, like from the Cult.
Hmm.
Like that album was really speaking to me while we were writing some of the stuff. So it's yeah, it's just big guitars, just real rock and roll sensibility. And then there's Stay, which is a very it's kind of a threadbare song. It's really pretty, and it's just kind of me. It's a song I wrote about like fighting to stay alive
Uh
when
huh.
you're mentally ill. You know, I've had a lot of trouble because of post-traumatic stress of dealing with like suicidal
Hmm.
ideations and self-harm ideation and things like that. And uh I don't want to ever give into those things. And it's about the song is sort of just like a conversation with myself about staying around, like staying alive and fighting to remember that there are things worth being here for,
Yeah.
and that there's things to look forward to. That's
Hmm.
like the kind of essence of the song, and that's a really pretty sort of dreamy. It's almost got this like it's got this like kind of Cure vibe to it, but it's more, I don't know, it's just different. It's very like 80s post-punk though.
Nice.
And it's a very pretty song,
Yeah.
so I'm very excited about that. That'll probably actually be our next single that will come
Cool.
out in like, I don't know, like a month or so. I
Mm.
don't know. It just depends on when we get the mixes back, and
Yeah.
then we have to get them mastered, and then there's like the art that has to get created. But needless to say, we will start releasing these songs. The way I'm looking at records now is not so much like we're going to build this record and then
Mm.
you're going to get the record. We're going to just start doing singles
Yeah.
because I think it's so much better to give each song that you really have worked hard on like the attention that it deserves.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, if you want to support, and you can buy the vinyl and you can buy the CD or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you'll have like a couple more songs that
Hmm.
are like B-sides. But yeah, we're going to be putting out a ton of music this like late spring and into the summer and really into the fall, and then the record will be out in like hopefully October is
Very
what we're planning on.
exciting. Oh,
Yeah,
that's gonna
it's
be
gonna be cool.
so cool.
Yeah, there's some really different stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think people are just gonna be like, I think fans that have been with us from the beginning will
Yeah.
still hear the voice,
Yeah.
but they will also be pretty like, whoa, that's different. Yeah, but it's in a good way. It's
Yeah.
in a, we're working with this Grammy award winning producer named Ben Allen. And like, normally I don't care that somebody's won accolades, but
Mm-hmm.
like, he deserved it. I mean, he is unbelievable. He's so diverse in his background. Like, he's worked with hip hop, he's worked with pop musicians,
Yeah.
like he worked with like Christina Aguilera at one
Oh
point.
wow.
Like, he worked with, but he's also done like some of this like really weird indie stuff that came out in the early 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
He did one of my favorite records of all time, which is this actually band from Georgia called Washed Out. There, are you familiar with that show Portlandia? Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It rings
uh,
a bell for me. Yeah.
they did the theme song to that
Ah,
show,
okay.
and he did this record called Within and Without, and it's just such a beautiful, like, expansive, lush, just gorgeous kind of, it's got this like lo-fi grit, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like beautiful and just, yeah, it's so good. So yeah, he having like working with Ben is a revelation
Yeah.
because it's totally changed the way that I look at like creating music and writing music and how to compose.
Mm-hmm.
Because he'll like, we'll bring in these songs, and oh, and one of the fun things that we're gonna do probably next year is we're gonna release our favorite demos from this album. So
Uh-huh.
you'll be able to hear like what it sounded like when we first wrote it and then
Mm-hmm.
what it ended up like. And that'll be really fun.
That's
But he
always fun to dive into, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and he's just one of those guys that he'll take these demos and we'll bring it in the studio and we'll play it, and he's like, okay, let's do this here and let's build this here and let's
Mm-hmm.
put some more guitar in this area. This needs some synth. This needs maybe a piano, or like, there's just so much cool stuff that he does, and
Yeah.
that's just somebody who is at the top of their game. And
Mm-hmm.
we're just fortunate because like we would never ever ever be able to afford him. But he just like found out about us, and we got to talking with him, and he just like wants to do it.
Oh,
So
that's so
he's been
cool.
helping us out, and I mean, yeah, it's just like one of those cool things that just kind of happens when you get to know people and get
Yeah.
out there and you start working really hard, like doors start opening, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and
cool things happen.
like, it's kind of also like, um how to phrase it. Um it's kind of like that thing that, as a band you haven't existed that long compared to some other
No,
people. Um
no.
so I
My
guess
friend,
I guess
my friend
like
has a saying. He says, every overnight success
mhm.
spent 10 years grinding.
Yeah.
Like, there effectively is no such thing as overnight success, because even
Yeah,
people that
exactly.
say like go viral on like TikTok or whatever, right? You have like the best song in the world and you go massively viral and you have 40 million views or whatever. Okay, well, you have that one song. What's next?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's about the process of creating a body of work and creating community around that work. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and like that's also something I talked with Chris Harms from the German metal band Lord of the Lost. I spoke to
Mhm.
him last year, and he said that after they like had their song Blood and Glitter, after that one had entered Eurovision, a lot of people approached him and were like, "So how does it feel to have overnight success?" And
It's
he
like,
was like, "My peeps, I have been working with music for like 20 years and I've had my own
yeah,
band for almost 15. This is not
yeah,
overnight success. But since you
no,
want to see
it's
what it looks like, here's a graph." And then he had made
right,
a little graph where he actually showed like all of their progress from like 2009 and said, "Do you call this overnight
right.
overnight success?"
Yeah, it's like, just because you haven't heard of something doesn't mean that it hasn't been around. But yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, I think for us ultimately, I do have to remind myself for at times like that we started in really 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot has happened very quickly for us, which is nice in
Yeah.
a way. But it also, you have to like temper yourself,
Yeah, of course.
because I think like one thing that I never want to have happen to me is like I don't ever want to forget like where the things that I've done in the past
Mm-hmm.
and what I've done and what I've seen and what that has made me as a person because I've seen people get a taste of success and become giant bastards like
Yeah,
really fast and I just like I don't know like that would be
that's
the
that's not the
worst possible thing for
yeah,
me
that's
like
not the kind of person you want to be.
right
Yeah.
so I'm happy with slow and steady and I'm happy with connecting to the audiences and building it one day at a time and
Mm-hmm.
not feeling like because there was a while I think like one thing that TikTok really ruined in a lot of us is like this desire to just get this like overnight huge hit and a lot of people will say to me well isn't that what happened to you and I'm like no like because
Mm-hmm.
I was on TikTok every single day in
Yeah.
2020 making videos going live
Yeah.
putting stuff out there connecting with people every single day that I wasn't at the fire department I was
Mm-hmm.
on there doing work
Yeah, it was
and they don't
basically
see
your
that
second job.
oh yeah it was I was doing 60 hours a week
Yeah.
easy on this stuff and they don't see that so they just see like oh the videos that exploded and they're like oh the goth dad thing that's the only reason why you're successful I'm like nah we it has I won't say very little but it has less than you would imagine
Mm-hmm.
to do with like having a couple videos pop off big time
Yeah.
and gaining a huge following because at the end of the day what most people don't realize is that like yeah we have 500 I don't even know 500 something thousand followers on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok you know how many of those people see my videos now like none I'm lucky if 1% of those people
Yeah.
see our videos and that's fine with me I don't like human beings are not wired for this shit we shouldn't be exposed to this many people all the time this like this torrential downpour of
Yeah.
constant content and I got to the point like last year where I was like this is making me mentally ill
Mm-hmm.
and I need to have a better interaction with this and now when I feel the need to create stuff for that I do it when I
Yeah.
think that it benefits and you know every now and then I just kick something out that's like sort of phoned in you know it's like hey here's a video of us playing live
Mm-hmm.
and I hope that reaches a broader audience and I hope that that connects to people but I don't get upset about it when it doesn't because 9 times out of 10 it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
and that's because we're not paying for it
Yeah,
so
and like the whole numbers game across social media is just so difficult. Like
yeah
you can
it's modern
have
slot machines. It's like you're
yeah,
putting in
exactly.
money and you're putting in time, which is money in essence,
Yeah.
and you're cranking that wheel down and hoping that it gives you a good result. And just before you quit forever, boom, jackpot. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
now you're hooked again. And
Yeah.
it's a risk or it's like input reward uh, uh, algorithm that constantly meters your engagement
Mm-hmm.
and like I've noticed like if I stop doing as much you know if I don't post for a while and
Yeah.
then come back not like crazy long time but post something again it'll do okay and I'm like oh it's because they want me to stay hooked
Mm-hmm.
they want me to keep going and I don't know I just like I'm simultaneously grateful for all of the stuff that it has provided for us like
Yeah.
I live a really cool life and I get to travel the world and play music and connect with people because of these social media platforms
Mm-hmm.
but I also like completely despise them because they are predatory they take advantage of people's dreams and desires to
Yeah.
make a shit ton of money for billionaire bastards who do not care about anyone other than themselves
Yeah,
and
exactly.
live in a level of opulence that is like beyond any of our wildest imagination. Like, could you imagine? I mean, let alone spending like $50,000 on a meal, but like just making like $1 million in a day. Can you like? And these dudes make millions of dollars like every few minutes. You know, some
Yeah,
of them, and
it's
it's like
absolutely crazy. Like if I could make 1 million in like 2 minutes, I wouldn't know what to do with my
Yeah,
life.
I would disappear
Well,
forever.
I would
If
know
I
what to do with my life, but
Yeah, if I made a ton of money, I would probably just be gone.
yeah,
Like I always love it when I see like a celebrity that's like just gets huge and then they just drop off the face of the earth.
yeah, kind
And
of
they don't
like whoosh.
they go, I this is enough. I've made enough money to where I never have to do anything I don't really want to do ever again as long as I'm reasonable.
Mhm.
And then they just go away. And I'm like, man, that's like the dream is like I
Yeah,
mean,
and then they only show up like occasionally just to
right. Right. Like if some reason, like right now, somebody walked in that door and was like, "Hey, Dusty, here's $10 million. No contract. Just take it." You would see me show up for shows like that somebody would promote,
Mhm.
and I would do everything that we do now, and I would talk to every single person in the
Yeah.
crowd, and then you wouldn't see me again until the next thing, until the next record. Like I just can't imagine. But like, yeah, the whole thing just pisses me off, and it
Mhm.
makes me like very fearful of the future for like what is going to happen to all of us, especially artists. I mean, with the
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
stuff
I
and
was about to say this is about AI, isn't it?
oh
Because oh
God,
boy, I've seen some stuff.
yeah.
I've
But
heard
I
some
also
stuff.
Oh yeah, you see, and it's only going to get crazier. But this is the one thing that I will say about AI and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it's something to be concerned with.
Mhm.
I think it's more, I believe that it's more of a concern for morality
Yeah.
towards everyday people. Like, you're going to start seeing, case in point,
Mhm.
I guarantee you within 1 year from now, I will probably have to acknowledge a fake video of me saying or doing something terrible, and as will a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, the whole
more
deep fake thing.
importantly, women and femme presenting people are going to have to uh, face a very disgusting and awful reality that people are going to use it for sexualized content against everyday people.
Yeah.
And it is going to be really, really, really bad
Mhm.
until we regulate this shit and like make sure that it is controlled and that it is watermarked
Yeah.
so that you can tell when it's not real or if it is real, because
Yeah, I
we're getting to
mean,
that point where it's uncanny valley is we've passed it. It is like, have you seen those videos of the Sora AI
yes.
that the
Yes.
I, if you had not told me, I would have never known.
Mhm.
I would have never known.
Yeah, and like out here in the EU, I know that they're working on legislation with all that, and I also know that they are kind of like crunching to make it happen as quick as possible because
Yeah,
they can see what direction it's headed in, and it's not necessarily
yeah,
100% good one. I mean, AI definitely has its uses. Like it can be utilized in in a lot of nice ways because there's a lot of little annoying menial stuff you can program
right,
it to do, and then you
exactly.
don't have to bother about it. But like to me, like as a creative person, it's just like no.
Yeah, it's scary, but I think it can also just be kind of like what you said. It can be something that can enhance
Yeah.
art, like existing art processes. So like, for example, like if I want to make a music video and I want to have like an airplane fly over my head at some point,
Mhm.
that can happen now, and that's like something that's feasible.
Yeah.
But it's I think there's a very like tough discussion of morality of
Mhm.
and the ethics of the use of AI, and like where does it draw its information from? How
Yeah.
does it create? Like, is it drawing art from other existing art to
Yeah.
create, which is
Yeah, because
technically
that's
what it does right now.
yeah,
It's like just pulling, it's not general AI, so it's just pulling from existing bodies of work and just sort of
exactly.
replicating. And that is theft in a sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and
So
it
there's a
does the
lot.
same. It does the same with music too. Like I
Yeah,
recently came
yeah.
across a music track, um, where I read that the entire thing was done by AI, and
Mm,
because I was because I listened to a lot of music, I could kind of recognize where those influences were from, and I was
Yeah,
just like, oh no, oh no, please don't tell me that it's gone and scraped from all of these
yeah,
people. Oh no.
yeah. I mean, it definitely
I mean,
likely was.
you could tell that it wasn't like created by a real human because
Right,
some
right.
things were a little bit strange. I wouldn't.
But things will get better,
Yeah.
and in that regard, and it will become indecipherable. But I do think that like one cool thing that artists have to keep in mind, and this is something, maybe this is just like something that I tell myself to
Hmm.
sleep at night, but like an AI can write a really wonderful song,
Yeah.
maybe, and it's really catchy and has every trapping of what makes a song really cool, but like it isn't a human being. It doesn't have a heart,
Yeah. It
and it
doesn't. It
doesn't.
doesn't have the same soul.
Yeah, and you know, to me, it's like it's not telling a true story. It's not telling. It's I'm not connecting to anything real.
Hmm.
It's just a fabrication. Which if you're a band or a musician or whatever, or any kind of art where you perform or show things in public,
Yeah.
you I think you still be okay because it's going to become more about the person behind the art and
Yeah.
less the thing itself,
Yeah.
as people abuse it.
Kind of like how we today revere like artists who are no longer with us. Like,
Right,
people will still pay like I don't know how much for insert no longer living artist here like David Bowie if there's some
right,
paraphernalia of his that shows up somewhere. People are willing to pay for it, even though he died years ago.
right.
And I guess in a sense that could also apply to AI because even though a person isn't here anymore, it still has that human touch, for lack of
Right.
better phrasing. And in the terms of AI, I think that will still be a thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe like in future generations, like if AI were to control everything,
Yeah.
then like maybe the human touch would become even more sought after in a
Hmm.
wholly digitized world.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok yesterday that I thought was really kind of scary, but
Hmm.
I think this guy was totally correct. He was like, I think what we will eventually see is you will have like anything, say, for example, like a streaming, like Netflix
Yeah.
or whatever, like you will have two price points. You will have organic
Hmm.
and procedural. You will have shows that are made totally by AI and it'll be like whatever. And then you'll have stuff made by humans
Yeah.
and you'll have to pay a premium for the like human made stuff. And I think that's probably quite likely because most people generally that are just sort of like everyday, they're probably gonna want the thing that's cheaper, that's just like
Yeah.
whatever, it's just like flashy,
I mean
you
that's
know
also I think that's also why you see a lot of people who aren't like artists in that sense
yes,
use AI to like generate whatever. Um,
exactly. Yeah, and it all
because
kind of has the same like feel to it,
yeah,
it all like it's like so fantastic and crazy and exuberant and ridiculous. Whereas like some of my favorite paintings are like really simple
hmm,
things, and yeah, I don't know. I think again, nuance. Say there it is again.
yes, and like it's just to me it's just so wild like how wide the thing with the AI and stuff has happened over just the last year. Like obviously they've like worked on AI like on the down low for like years now,
Yeah,
but in the terms of just what it did for like 1 year ago compared to now, or even just 3 or 6 months ago, it's
yeah.
insane.
It's
Like,
it's completely crazy.
yeah, one thing
Yeah.
one thing I also think is wild is like seeing like clothing companies use AI models. That's just weird and wild to me. Like, it still doesn't give me an idea of what the clothing would look like on me, but
Right. It's like a real human being. Yeah.
uh-huh.
And yeah, and that's
Never,
it's so
never mind
weird to me.
how, never mind how it might also promote like a specific vision of whatever they're trying to sell
Right.
is.
Yeah. I imagine that will play into like heavy dysphoria for
Yeah,
people, this like idealized image of a body and what that's supposed to look like.
yeah.
And I mean that's just like yeah, I think that's
It's
another like really negative way that that might manifest.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely words. It's definitely something that people, not necessarily just parents, but like people will have to discuss with younger people, like how to navigate all of this
Yeah.
because it's gonna be really, really difficult in the future, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And like for people like you and me, I mean, you're like, I don't know, 8, maybe 10 years older than I am.
Mm.
Like, um, we had to navigate a certain set of things, like growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and all that jazz
Right.
with all that that's entailed of body dysmorphia and dysphoria
Yeah.
and all that jazz.
Well,
And
we were the last generation that didn't have all the social
exactly,
media and all the pervasive technology.
exactly,
You know, like the
because
way that kids grew up in the 90s was largely kind of the same as the way that kids grew up in the 80s
yeah,
and 70s and
yeah, just
onwards.
just
It's
with
like
just with different fashions and different TV
exactly.
programs.
Yeah, the culture changed a little bit,
Yeah.
but the essence of what we did back then was largely the same. Like you got together with your friends, you met, you know, at a certain time. You know, nobody had phones to call and be like, "Hey, are you coming to this thing?" Like, no, it
Yeah,
was just
and
like
and
meet
and
at the house with the bikes and at this time, and you
yeah,
know,
and if you were lucky enough to have internet, then pray that your sibling weren't using the internet or wanting to
oh
use the
yeah,
phone at the same time,
oh
because
man,
then nothing would happen.
it was terrible. I lost so many games of Half-Life when I was playing that and Counter-Strike and all that stuff.
Oh
My
yeah,
sister
yeah,
would pick up the
totally,
phone.
totally.
Oh, oh, terrible.
Especially because it then took like what felt like 4 years to get back on, because you
Oh
just had
yeah,
to sit and wait, and then you
yeah.
also like the whole file transfer thing in
Oh my
Windows where it said,
God.
yeah, you now have 34 years left until this
Yeah,
file has transferred. And now
great.
the same amount of data would take it like, I don't know, 30
Yeah, half a
seconds.
second. Yeah. It's crazy.
And I think it's
Uh,
I think it's funny, but also a little bit wild and a little bit scary how quick stuff has moved. Like in
yes.
certain years, especially like within the past 5 or 10 years, it's just like
Right.
insane how quick everything has moved.
Right. But I to bring us back around to goth stuff though, I to I'll say this. That's why it's so important to have things like goth nights
Yeah,
and community events and things like that because like,
definitely.
you know, while this thing like dictates so much of my life now, I can also just put it down and walk out the door and go to something
Yeah.
and go see a band play or get a drink with a friend or have a meal with a friend or like just sit in a room with somebody. Like there we can get our like attention back and we have the means within us to build community and real things that are actually significant in people's lives.
Yeah.
And that's like why I love goth stuff, like why I love our goth night that we've built here and Vision Video and all of these things, because it transcends any level of like innovation. There will always like, no matter like, I love technology. I am a
Yeah.
total nerd. I built this computer. I love VR. I love
Yeah, it's
like
all really cool.
I love all video games. I do all this stuff all the time. But nothing is ever as fun as going to goth night or going to a show. It's
Yeah,
never as
exactly.
fun. It's never as good.
Exactly,
And
because you get to dance and meet new people, hear
yeah,
new
yeah.
music.
And that will always be there
Yeah,
as
exactly.
long as we keep it alive. So there's like this is I feel like a conspiracy theorist for positive things sometimes.
I
I'm like trying to
mean,
lead people to these
to
realizations of why gatekeeping is terrible and why being a dick about whether this band is goth or not is
yeah.
stupid. It's like, yeah, because if you keep doing that, this stuff will disappear and then we will have to get onto VR to go meet at the goth night and it's just going to
Exactly.
be a shittier version of the same thing.
Exactly, and like it's just like, come on people, support your local scene.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's just so important to like support your local scene. And okay, maybe I don't know, maybe Brandon from like over there is like a complete knobhead, but no one says you have to go talk to him
Right.
just because you're
Right.
in the same venue. Just coexist and do
Yep.
your own thing in your own corner.
Yep.
Like
Exactly.
don't don't
As long
let
as
don't let that
as long
take
as people
something.
aren't doing things that are totally toxic and
Yeah,
totally detrimental to the community, it's like you don't have to get along with everybody. You don't have to be best friends with everybody,
exactly.
but
And I think a
just
lot of
support
people
it.
a lot of people forget that you don't have to be best friends with everyone, and that you
Oh,
can exist in the same space as someone you dislike because you don't have to talk to them.
exactly. It's
And
a wonderful
like,
thing about being an adult is you can go, yeah, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, and then just
yeah, exactly.
uh,
And like, yeah, it's just it's up to people to keep the scene alive, and then it doesn't matter what scene it is. It could also be the case for like the hip hop scene or
mhm.
the metal scene. It's not
Yep.
just
Yeah,
to
these
do
things
with
are general ideologies that subscribe to any kind of community events, any
exactly,
kind of subculture or group of common bond.
exactly.
Um, yeah, I think it's just like basic community adherence, you know.
And like it's just so important because otherwise we're not gonna be here in 10 years. The robots might be, but
Yeah,
we're not gonna
yeah,
be here
yeah. I'll
as
I'll
a
just be at
scene.
the bar like with a laptop, like playing like songs from The Cure and Chameleons and the Sound.
Do you remember way back when?
Exactly. We used to get together and dance in the dance hall, and it was way more fun than this VR. Oh boy.
Yeah, like it's crazy, and it's gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen in the future.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I'm optimistic
yeah,
overall. I think
same.
I think smart people that are smarter than myself are going to understand the significance of controlling these things
Yeah,
versus letting unfettered profit and capitalism rule the letter of the law.
yeah, definitely.
And I have to have faith in that because otherwise I'll go crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna be too miserable if you don't have faith. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but yeah, like I think I have one more question for you, and that's on a
Sure.
light note.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I love a good light last question.
yes, it might be a difficult one, but it is on a light note.
Ooh.
It's
Okay.
um,
Okay.
it's like, is there any one track, regardless of genre? Because I know
Hmm.
that you've DJed yourself, you play music, I think you've also done like karaoke here and there. Um,
Yeah. Oh
is
yeah.
there any one track, regardless of how cringe, that has you being able to absolutely not sit still? Whenever you hear it, you're just like bouncing around, or you just can't sit still to it.
Yeah. Let me think. Um,
No limits here.
yeah. The one song, let me think. The first thing that just like kind of comes to mind. Uh, so just like something that just makes me dance and go
Yeah.
nuts. Um, oh boy. Let me think. Um, give me a second. It will come
Take your
to me.
time. Take your time.
Um, oh, this is one of my favorite songs to dance to. Every time it gets played, I actually played this at Goth Night on
Uh
Saturday,
huh.
which I'd never done before, and I mean, I always play like weird stuff at the end of the night when there's like only a few people left because I'm like, screw it, let's just have fun.
Yeah.
One of my favorite bands of all time uh, is hilariously it's Big Country. It's a Scottish band.
Uh huh.
They had a song called "In a Big Country" off the record, also called Big Country. And it's
Very
just this
creative.
beautiful, yeah, I know, but it's this beautiful song. It's very like post-punk, like new wavy kind of rock uh band from Scotland, and it has this heavy Scottish vibe to it that I can't explain other than like there's this like one, guitar riff where they play sort of like it sounds like bagpipes essentially, but it's a guitar.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same melodic structure as bagpipe music. But that song is just such a beautiful, fun, weird song, and it's just like it's got this like jig dance thing
Yeah.
to it. And every time I hear it, I'm like, hell yeah, big country. It's just like it's that, and that whole record is actually phenomenal. And everything that they did was incredible. So yeah, I'd say like maybe In a Big Country is a good one.
Yeah.
But also like, like really anything by the B-52s, like not to be like too Athens centric, but they are like legends here. Yeah. And that was the first band that I ever saw actually was the B-52s. I was 16 and it just like blew my mind. So like if you play Love Shack at in any environment or setting, like I'm gonna dance to it because it's just like I've been in like grocery stores and they'll play Love Shack and I'm just like
yeah, now I just have that mental image of you hearing it through the door and just literally busting through the door and being like, woo, to the dance floor.
Baby. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's fun.
Yeah. But yeah, that was technically my last question to you.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and,
I've had fun listening to you.
I hope you'll have me back sometime.
Sure, sure. I'd be down for that. Definitely.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Well, once we get the next record out, I'm sure we'll have tons to talk about because I'll definitely want to hear what you think about it at that point.
I'll definitely let you know. I'll definitely let you know. I'm looking forward to hear what else is in store for you guys. And awesome. I really hope that everything with like the recording and the tours and everything goes brilliantly.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be great. We start Florida this week on Friday, and we do like a week and a half in Florida, and then we're home for a week in Texas, and then we're gone for like 2 months straight. Yeah. And then it's like some time off to do some small things in the summer to finish the record, maybe some festivals, and into the fall we have our festival here in Athens called Southern Gothic that'll be announced tomorrow. Yeah. And like Europe in late November and UK and Ireland in December. So quite a year. Yeah, it's going to be crazy.
That's going to be great and crazy in all the best ways, I'm sure. Yeah. So really, really good luck with that. This interview has been recorded, so I will be popping it on the tube at some point.
Cool.
Just in case someone missed out on it, because
for sure. Yeah.
I wanted them to have this experience too, so I figured I'm going to record it. So it's going to be up later. But yeah, I had so much fun talking to you, and I'm pretty sure the audience did too, because people have been nothing but positive in the comments. They have had a great time. And cool. Everyone, if you don't already follow Vision Video, go follow them, go give them all the love. If you're out there being able to catch them on the road, go catch them. You're in for a lot of fun. And Goth Dad, I will leave you with the last word, Dusty.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find all of our stuff on visionvideoband.com. There's links to all of our socials, our Spotify, our other streaming services. We've also got merch and ticket links there, and we run that website and we send all of our merch out, and it's all done here in Athens. So all of that goes a long way to supporting us. And I, just like again, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate it, because I never imagined that it would be what it is, and we've got a lot of really great stuff in the future, but the here and now is pretty damn good, and it's all because of y'all. So thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, well, on that note, I will wish you a good night, Dusty, and to my audience, I will be right back.
Alrighty. Take care, baby bats. See ya.
See ya.
Bye,
Stay
y'all.
strange.
Thanks again. Yeah, you too. Stay strange. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.